Okay, everyone. Good morning again. My name is Naz Barma. I am a professor here at the Josef Korbel School of Global and Public Affairs and the director of the Scrivner Institute of Public Policy, which is a very happy host of this morning's event. We're so pleased to be with you here for what I think is the 9th installment of the Scrivner Policy Roundtable, now in its 5th year of operation. Especially delighted today to welcome the team from the Colorado Project, which includes the Korbel School's Dean, Fritz Mayer, who I'll introduce in just a moment, Jack Becker, Lysandra Gonzalez, Bill Jager, and Aaron Miltenberger, who you'll be hearing from, and Fritz and Jack will introduce them more fully. Welcome especially to the students, faculty, and staff from across the University of Denver, as well as our community partners in the policy sphere. The Scrivner Institute hosts this event as part of our core mandate to serve as an interdisciplinary hub for policy conversations across campus and with the community in which we're embedded. And today's conversation, led by the Colorado Project, is such a great opportunity to kind of see how that plays out in practice. The Colorado Project is a signature initiative of the Korbel School that the Scrivner Institute is proud to have partnered with. And the work that you're about to hear about fits our objectives of kind of having informed, evidence-based, engaged dialogue about the policy issues that affect us all so perfectly. This is an invitation-only format. We're thrilled that you're all here. And the format that we've selected is really chosen to have to be conducive to frank and constructive policy conversations. We're going to record the presentation portion of this event, and then the presentation will be followed by small group discussions at your table, which will not be recorded and are held under closed-door rules, where nothing should be attributed to the people or the organizations who are here, just to ensure that we can have as open and frank a conversation as possible. I wanted to thank Katie Aker, the Associate Director of the Scrivner Institute of Public Policy, who puts on these events and is instrumental in our roundtable concept in general. And enormous thanks again to all of our presenters today. I'll hand the microphone over to Fritz Mayer, Dean of the Korbel School, and by the way, Professor of Public Policy, who has stewarded this work along with Jack Becker.
Well, good morning. We had a beautiful day, and it's so exciting to see you all, and for us, really exciting to be able to share with you what's been happening with the Colorado Project, where it's going, and more than that, to engage with you. That's the purpose of these roundtables, to engage with you, to get your feedback and insights about what we can do with this work. It's certainly a work in progress for all of us. So thank you all for being here. It's great. I see so many friends, people who've been involved in the project. Others have been at other Scrivner policy roundtables. As Naz said, and we've really made engaging with the community, engaging in Colorado, a centerpiece of what we try to do at the Korbel School. And in this example, and is this program is really a perfect fit for that. It's something that the genesis of the program was really coincident with the founding of the Scrivner Institute, where we really wanted to do what we could to be a good neighbor, to be a good citizen in Colorado, and we explored different possibilities. But it seemed that there was an opportunity for us to use our capacity to bring people together to address major issues facing the state of Colorado, and that was really the genesis of the idea. We in the first iteration of the project, what we've called Colorado Project 1.0. We brought together a remarkable group of leaders across the state from different regions, different sectors, to trying to hash out what I would call as a high-level strategy for the state for sustainable, inclusive economic growth. And the output of that project was a report, which you can see on our website. It's actually surprisingly meaty. In lots of ways, and kudos to the people who've led the project. First, Becca Montgomery, Landon Mascareñas, who is here, and now Jack Becker, who will say a good bit more about what's happening in the second iteration. one of the things that became very obvious in our first year of the project was the divide between, let's call it the Front Range and the rest of Colorado, often sort of summarized as a rural-urban divide. But that simplifies things too much because there are different rural communities or non-Front Range communities in Colorado. It's very different in different places, the challenges faced by those communities. And so we've really, so then we just said, well, what do we do next? And we decided we should focus on those particular regions and the challenges they faced in what we've called rural Colorado, rural renaissance. It's a little bit aspirational, but I think we also discovered in the course of the year that it's actually real as well, that there's an awful lot going on in these communities in rural Colorado. And the way we've handled it, rather than us sitting around and thinking about it, is that we've gone to communities in the Yampa Valley, in the San Luis Valley, in Northeast Colorado, to be partners and to listen, frankly, to the challenges that communities face, but also to learn about some of the really cool things that are happening. And there are really cool things happening, and you're going to hear a bit about them today. The goal of this project now in its second year, at one level, is to produce another report that summarizes our findings. But it's also to enable communities to share with each other the things that are happening, because there's a lot going on, creative ideas that are happening one place or another, to identify things that can be done locally, and not trivially, to help us think about what the state could do better to help support, nourish, remove bottlenecks, and to amplify the kind of work that is already happening in these communities. And we have a kind of a really nice opportunity, I would say. A week ago Sunday, in this room, we had a conversation with our good friends, Michael Bennett and Phil Weiser. I got to ask a question straight out of the Colorado project. You know, what are you thinking about in this area? And what you realize is that one of the two of them is likely to be the next governor. We don't know, what will happen, but if that is the case, we will have remarkable access to people at the highest level of state government, people who actually are reasonably already attuned to these issues, and to whom we have an open door. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity to help rebalance the attention that is paid to communities outside the Front Range, which is not always been the case. And I think that's certainly one of the things we heard with a vengeance. So we've learned a lot this year. We'll share some of some of those learnings. I do think we've learned that there's no lack of innovation and leadership, but what is needed is to think creatively about how to nourish that and support that. So today, the goal is obviously to share a bit with you what we've been learning. We'll have the opportunity. You'll have the opportunity to hear from three people who've been really involved in this project, in philanthropy, in local and talent development, and organizations working directly in rural communities, who can share with you what's been happening. And then, as Naz explained, there's an opportunity to really engage with us, frankly, to help us think as clearly as we can, to react to what you're hearing, and to have a great conversation. So really looking forward to that conversation. Let me add my thanks to the team. Nothing happens without a team. I'm going to mention Sage Brewer as well. She's now known as Sage from Meeker because she asked a question at the session with Senator Bennett and Attorney General Weiser, and identifies herself as Sage from Meeker, and so they subsequently referred to you that way. Sage is, in addition to Katie and Grace, who was at the front desk, have been incredibly helpful. But it's now my pleasure to introduce Jack Becker. Jack is the director of the project, has led this past year, and is continuing to lead the rural renaissance portion of the phase of the Colorado project. He's done a fabulous job in making good on the promise that we will actually listen to people when we go to communities, and really has brought together in each of the places that we've gone quite a collection of local leaders, very thoughtful people, and we've had really great conversations. I should say, selfishly for me, it's been fantastic because as you can hear from the remnant of my Southern accent, I'm not originally from Colorado, and it's been a great education for me to be able to go to all of these communities. But with that, let me turn it over to you, Jack. Thank you for all you're doing, and look forward to the conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Well, thank you, Fritz, and thank you, Naz. I appreciate y'all playing host, being sponsors and believers in the project is very critical. And Fritz, you beat me a little bit to the punch of elevating the role and contributions, not only of myself, but of Sage, Katie, Maddie, who's not here today, as well as Grace. So again, just want to underscore that it certainly takes a team, takes a village to make visits throughout the state happen. So thank y'all so much. My role as project lead with this initiative really is a joyful one. I get to interact with incredible leaders from throughout the state and hear about what's going on, hear about exciting initiatives, and work with them to shape our visits last year, as well as what our visits will look like this year. I'm so excited to talk a little bit about that. Fritz detailed the Rural Renaissance Project. You know, we're really thinking of it as a 2-year project. So today is a little bit of a mid-project point check-in. And it's a 2-year process of both learning and leading. 2025, learning, building relationships, what's happening in communities, what do people want to share that's their most exciting innovations, but also some of their most daunting challenges that we have to listen to and confront into the future. But also 2026, leading, taking action. Fritz talked directly about an incredible moment that we have in Colorado, a leadership transition at many levels of government that opens up the opportunity and the possibility to talk about both renewing what's good about our existing frameworks of relationship throughout the state, but also building toward greater opportunity and equity in how everyone thrives economically. And we really chose 3 specific regions to visit. One, we couldn't go to every portion of the state. We simply didn't have the time and the resources to do so. But why did we choose these 3 regions? In part, we felt like they represented 3 distinct places. Fritz talked about how we often fall into this sort of trope or this belief in rhetoric, and for many people an understanding that rural Colorado and our rural places are a monolith and a monolithic experience, and that's by no means true. And so we chose 3 places that we felt like had a diversity of differences in geography in the plains, but also in their economy and their history, in the San Luis Valley, in the Yampa Valley or Northwest Colorado. And for example, the Yampa Valley giving us sort of a broader insight into the mountain resort and resort adjacent community experience. And so these archetypes giving us an opportunity to understand distinct areas, but also potentially some scalable insights. Important to the process was working with field innovators, or sort of like our rural Renaissance leaders and connectors in communities that we visited. People that could provide warm welcomes and introductions for us, that could help build out the agendas for the visits that we undertook. And also could perhaps, and many did, join us along the way. We were very intentional that the tent of inclusion remained open for our visits. And in many cases, we added folks in the journey along the way, much like a tour bus makes stops and might bring people on and off. We asked our participants, 30 plus strong, to come to at least 2 out of 3 of the visits. And then again, we added folks along the way. And our key action items from 2025 was first to reconvene a group of participants. We had some folks from that initial 1.0 group that joined us, and then to bring on a broader set of folks to join us as well. And with that, I'd like to pause and just ask for our Colorado Project participants to just kind of raise their hands and identify themselves. So thanks y'all so much for joining us. We also made this available virtually to some of our Colorado Project participants, as well as community members. And I think there's 8 or 9 folks joining us from each of the 3 regions as well. So want to thank them for their participation, looking directly into the camera now, as I think I'm supposed to do. But thank you for your participation and for joining us today as well. And as Fritz talked about, a big portion of the work was about identifying, what we call breakthrough practices or bright spots in the work. And while I can't go into in-depth detail on many or all of those today, I'll touch on sort of maybe just a few. Rural Renaissance, we believe, is strong, and there's a lot of incredible work happening throughout the state. We undertook our visits much with the lens of what we've come to call our Thriving Four. This is essentially these 4 areas or domains that grew out of the initial Colorado Project work that are notable both for the breadth and depth that they have individually, but I think more notable when we can sort of look at the work happening throughout the state through this entire lens at once. That's a challenging thing to do. I know, because I tried to put together panels and put together field trips and tours throughout the state that would allow us to do so, to tease out how business climate and access to land and natural resource stewardship interact with cost of living issues. But it's one that I think our future really calls for, and one that we heard, I think, underscore some of the most successful work being done throughout the state. And so I just want to take you to one of our visits. This was in Sterling, played host, but really Northeast Colorado. Drew folks from throughout the broader 6-county area. This was June of last year. And our project participants really had the opportunity to engage with a broad set of individuals. We had roundtables and panel discussions here with Tim Staley from the CSU Regional Engagement Center, as well as a leader from the Northeast Council of Governments, to think about the importance of regionalism and ways that counties are coming together on a regional basis. Here at a Nextera wind energy turbine, super cool. Really tall, but also a really interesting conversation. We worked with a family rancher who has had this ranching site, farm and ranching site, for multiple generations. And we really approached it thinking about the land use nexus. What has being able to lease out part of the land, part of the site for renewable energy development been able to afford this farming family in terms of sustainably operating their property. And so being able to have sort of a deeper conversation there. But also, one block over, where Nextera did not locate this site, and the open plain view has changed, and they're not being afforded the same renewable lease dollars. The thought is different, right? And so we were able to kind of engage in much of the nuance of sort of this, the so-called land use nexus on a number of fronts. Here with the Northeast BOCES, which brings together 11 school districts in Northeast Colorado, with Mike White addressing us, president of Northeast Junior College, Kyle Stumpf and his team from Holyoke School District, with a conversation about workforce development and what sort of pathways and opportunities are we offering young people that are meaningful to be able to directly take advantage of jobs that are there when our young people graduate. And because our places are not merely geography and economy, we were really clear that we also needed to engage in culture. So here we're with County Commissioner Jim Santamasso, longtime, I think 4th or 5th generation rancher, and also a member of the Colorado Auctioneering Hall of Fame. And we were able to do a live auction. Colin Lacey, who's here today. Awesome. This is a piece of local artwork that we purchased. And we engaged in what I would say is quite a robust auction. It got aggressive, Colin says. So, we experienced joy and also was able to engage Commissioner Santamasso in understanding the importance of auctioneering culture to economy, to culture, and to legacy of a place. So, lots of depth and dynamism to our visits, to build relationships and to just start to take away some, what I would say are some emerging observations. And I just want to note that as I go through some of these, you might even say, well, those are true anywhere. And I think that in many cases, that's absolutely right. But I think that what part of my takeaway is that in many of our rural and frontier spaces, some of these emerging observations are even higher stakes, with less room to navigate on either side. So the first is that our challenges and successes are tightly linked together. And I think we can think about this on a number of fronts. First is, for sure, our cost of living issues and ability to get that right are either currently prerequisites or quickly becoming prerequisites for example, labor force participation and economic opportunity within our communities. I talked a little bit about the land use nexus, but we see that balancing pretty diffuse and intense interests are absolutely critical. And our rural communities are the stewards and holders of the majority, the vast majority of our natural resources. And we hear from them in our visits, and I think many folks here that are engaged in work hear from folks that it is not currently an equitable feeling of resource distribution. And we know that our rural communities deserve, at least at a minimum, an equitable or an equal seat at the table, if not more than that, as the sort of stewards of our land. Access to capital continues to be a real pain point and conversation point. In one conversation we had with a leader in Craig, we heard of a capital stack for an affordable housing project that I think was at least 10 or 11 strong, each with its own layering of requirements that must be met. And so this is really something where philanthropy, private capital, public capital sources, and actors have an opportunity, I think, in the years ahead. Attracting and retaining talent remains a critical priority across our regions. And we heard and experienced many incredible bright spots that deserve to be at a minimum celebrated or invested in and supported to ensure sustainability. There's incredible workforce development initiatives underway that work at a regional basis. There is incredible work to diversify talent structures and diversify economic opportunities ongoing. We heard of a concept of a return to rural, as well as a specific initiative in Northeast Colorado, seeking to really tap back into communities that move back, but also understanding some of the challenges and sort of, again, the prerequisites that really need to be in effect for folks to land comfortably. And finally, we see clear opportunities to build and leverage at the regional level throughout rural Colorado. Within this, we had a lot of interaction with, what I would say are sort of different types of hubs, whether they're nonprofits, councils of government, boards of cooperative educational services, and others that are thinking both within their sort of traditional roles and boundaries and starting to think outside it in a way that brings communities together. And there's a lot to be celebrated there. And also we heard about some of the challenges within that. Anchor institutions, similarly, many play an outsized influence in convening and offering resources such as larger hospital networks and boys and girls clubs and community foundations. They provide critical convening or direct resources or services to communities, and also are thinking about ways to step outside their traditional work or broaden their mission and their work. And so I'm going to leave it at that and call up our incredible panel. So Bill, Lysandra, and Aaron, if you all would join us up here.
Hi, everyone.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I am really excited to welcome Bill Jagger, Aaron Miltenberger, and Lysandra Gonzalez. They each have played really incredible roles in the Colorado project. Bill representing the Lohr Foundation. Lohr Foundation has been a sponsor of the project last year and then also this year, but really more so than that, has played a really incredible thought partner to the work and also connector, in particular with their community in Monte Vista, which is one of the communities that we visited during our regional visit to the San Luis Valley. So I hope that he'll speak a little bit to that. Aaron Miltenberger was our sort of rural renaissance connector and leader in the San Luis Valley as well. He lives in Alamosa and has a dual role, dual hat that I think he's bringing to today. One is a longtime leader in the community there and co-director of the San Luis Valley Boys and Girls Club. And then also as the founder and co-director or director of Co-Center, which is an incredible statewide initiative that I'll let him kind of speak more directly to. And then Lysandra Gonzalez, CEO of Rocky Mountain Partnership, Cradle to Career, is just a presence certainly in the metro area, but also throughout the state and country, speaking to the importance of meaningful opportunities for young people, and has been an incredible leader, first as a co-chair with Colorado Project 1.0, and then a project participant in 2.0. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us. And with that said, maybe Bill, we can start with you and interested first if you can just say a little bit more about your work with Lure, and then also, what spoke to you about the Colorado project.
Thanks, Jack, and excited to chat a little bit about the conditions that can help rural communities thrive, and that's really what we're driving towards. The Lure Foundation is a private foundation focused on working with people in rural places to improve quality of life. So we're a funder that looks at all the underpinnings of quality of life, whether it be education, economic development, health, housing, transportation, water. So not an issue-specific funder. And to give a sense of how we try to walk the talk of how we fund, we think philanthropy, and as we get there with public policy, it just needs to work differently in rural places. And so we believe that the work needs to be local. And so I'm here as a conduit for the good work that our community officers who live in and are from the communities where we do our grant making do every day. And so in Monte Vista, that's my colleague Yvette Atencio. In Cortez, that's Nikki Crowley. And we are in 8 communities across 5 different states, funding deeply and listening first in our work. We also sort of try to approach the work with a perspective that says, in rural places, you often don't have a concentration of nonprofits and service organizations and philanthropic organizations who are ready to take on the work that it takes. And so we think you have to be able to work with people and not just organizations. And so our grant making is responsive to that. It's really around the idea of an American with a good idea to make their community better, and how do we get their dollars into their hands tomorrow to implement a project. So just to give a sense, across 7 communities last year, we made 670 grants led by 460 different individuals. We don't have grant deadlines. We don't have an application. It's a conversation with that community officer in your community about what it takes to bring a project forward. And more than half of those grantees had their check in hand within 2 weeks of bringing the idea forward to a community officer. So that is just a way we try to walk the talk. I can tell you all the ways we're missing the mark too, if interested. But sort of what called us here around Colorado Project is to say, that is a portfolio of grant making that is also a huge reservoir of data of what concerns rural people and what they want to do about making their community better. And we can do our work deeply and locally, but if we stop there, we're missing the opportunity to elevate our horizon to say, what is the systems and policies and leadership that needs to happen that create the conditions for all rural communities to thrive. And we were excited about, Landon originally opening the door to the conversation, and now Jack and Fritz and team sort of bringing forward thought leadership that can sort of add fuel to the fire that we're trying to build in rural places.
Thanks. Aaron, same to you. Interested if you could detail a little bit more about your work and also what's called you to Colorado Project.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks for being here this morning. I really appreciate being in a room of people who are concerned and care about the entirety of Colorado. How many of you, by a show of hands, traveled more than 3 hours to be here today? So these are your heroes, right? And I also am one of those people who traveled more than 3 hours to be here. Jack introduced me as somebody who is playing a couple of different roles, both with the Boys and Girls Clubs of the San Luis Valley and Co-Center. We take everything that you know about out-of-school time programs and rural development, you put it in a snow globe, you shake it up, and whatever falls down is what we do. We are filling the spaces that nobody else is filling because it's what our young people and our families need. I also am in 2 spaces sitting in the San Luis Valley and coming to Denver, Colorado. So I spend a lot of my time traveling between these 2 spaces because we know if you're not at the table, you're on the menu or you're forgotten, right? I want to highlight a couple of things with my time. First, Fritz Mayer said, there's no lack of leadership or innovation. There's a lack of support to nourish that. And I think that's what we see every day. I'll get into it a little bit more as we go through some of the questions, but we believe that the talent, the innovation, the entrepreneurship are not only available in rural spaces, but they are ripe and ready in rural spaces in a way that they don't show up in spaces like this in the same kind of way. My grandfather used to say to me, we're all better when we're all better. We would feed our neighbor kids and make sure that they had shoes on their feet, not because that's what we wanted to do because they were less than us, but because we didn't see a difference between them and us, right? It's this Martin Buber, ich und du, like I am you. And when we lift each other all up, we all stand from a higher platform. I think the other thing that I want to recognize is that this is another thing that both Fritz said and Jack said. I was talking to Adrian with Reimagine Colorado. When we think about rural Colorado and urban Colorado, it's the liminal spaces, it's the connective tissue between those doing the work every day and those who are making policy that impacts that work. And we have to think about ways that we connect those two and prize them as equal partners in that work. So the challenge for me isn't that rural communities don't know what to do. The challenge is that the systems around them are rarely designed to listen, to learn, and to move at the speed of local leadership.
Thank you, Aaron. And Lysandra, similar question for you, and also just interested in why you're a long hauler with us at this point, being involved in Colorado Project 1.0 in a leadership capacity, and and in particular, I just want to point out that Rocky Mountain Partnership, Cradle to Career, really stepped up in 2025 and supported in kind the Colorado Project, working with some of your target champions in each of the regions that we visited, as well as identifying young people in each of the regions that and supporting them to attend and participate meaningfully during our visit. So I want to thank you for that and just really lift that work.
Well, obviously, we didn't want to be on the menu, so that's why we're participating. No, I'm just kidding. It's so good to see everyone. I feel like parking was a little bit of a challenge for me, but I was like, I want to get in there. It's like a family reunion to see so many of you that we spent time together in some really incredible places across Colorado. So I'm born and raised in Brighton, Colorado. And so my dad is an immigrant. My mom's family migrated from South Texas to work the farm fields in the community that I grew up in. And so my ties, even though folks are like, that's not rural, it's not rural anymore. I'm like, it was when I was there. Like, what? I came back from traveling, I was out of state with some work, and I came home and I'm like, what? We have a Starbucks? And now there's many Starbucks. So anyway, it's my heart. I know that across Colorado, the massive parts of Colorado, we cannot move the goals that often are developed here in the metro area or for the state without rural Colorado. And there's so much richness in terms of the innovation, because we have to be scrappy, right? We had to get creative. When folks are talking about some of the things that are solutions that they're putting on the table now, I'm like, oh God, we've been doing that for a long time. We just didn't have the resource or the platform to share some of the work that we were doing in our communities, right? And so for me, the ability to really get back connected into the amazing things that are happening and how do we build off of that is the number one reason why I'm at the table. And so Rocky Mountain Partnership, Cradle to Career, the work that I do is really around bringing all of the community members and partners together who have decided that everyone's responsibility is supporting young people to not just survive, but to thrive. There are 826,000 young people up to the age of 35 in Colorado right now who are not meeting one of 8 critical milestones that tell us if they meet these milestones, they're going to actually be able to take care of themselves and their families and contribute to a better economy. So what do? We import our talent instead of really strengthening the structures that should be strengthened to support the talent to develop. And so we have to fix that. And so we bring education, business, government in local communities alongside the most important ones, the young people who we're trying to impact. So we have civic influencer Gabby is a young person from our community who's helped leading this work shoulder to shoulder with all these decision makers who have all the formal authority. And we say, if we all sit on the same side of the table, imagine what is possible, because everybody is impacting some sort of element that's essential for a young person to thrive. And so that's what we do. But then we bind that with accountability and measuring the impact of this collective work. And so we're based in North Metro area. I say Denver, damn it, but no offense to any of our Denver folks, but North Metro area, which is Adams County, Broomfield, Aurora, and Arvada. Why? Because we can't do it unless we band together in a region to really solve for some of the challenges that our young people are experiencing. But through Cradle to Career Colorado, we're simply saying to our brothers and sisters in other parts of the state, you're doing incredible work. Step up and help us measure the impact of how many more young people you're supporting in your area so that we can really tell a powerful story of the good things that are happening and how many more young people we're supporting. And so shout out to Christine with Colorado Thrives. She's a Target champion. The incredible work that she convenes with business leaders is contributing to 30,000 more young people in Colorado meeting these outcomes by 2030. Rocky Mountain Partnership, our region, we've stepped up and we said 71,000 by 2030. And so we're working with communities across the state to do the same. So that's what we do.
Thank you very much. So Bill, one of the things at DU that we like to learn, in particular at Korbel and Scrivner, is to be focused on evidence and be focused on and one of the I think quite insightful things that Laura did was partner with Gallup last year to do a poll. And so I want to ask you a couple questions about that. So one of the striking findings that I took away from that work with Gallup is a deep sense among rural Americans of self-reported community cohesion and desire to report in community life. It was quite high, and in many cases higher than many people I think that live in urban areas, if I recall. But that was also paired with a finding that only 3 to 9% are stepping into either formal or informal leadership roles that bring about what Laura kind of called, important activities that lead to local improvement. So despite this, one of our key observations, during visits, I would say, is just how tightly linked communities are, right? Or not even despite this, but I think it supports it. Communities are tightly linked. And we hear, we interacted with folks that, Aaron could detail this out. Aaron serves on many boards in the San Luis Valley. And in fact, I have been to Alamosa for other meetings and come across Aaron at that meeting. And so there's a lot of that I think contributes to this community cohesion, right? So what does the research and Laura's work suggest or pathways for catalyzing rural social capital for economic vibrancy?
Yeah, and for folks who want to dig in, on our website, lorefoundation.org/insights, you can find the full Gallup report. It's a nationally representative survey, not just of rural Americans, but all Americans, and really is focused on what does it take to unlock local leadership. And my colleague Tabitha Vergutz, who's our community officer in Libby, Montana, small town of about 4,000, 3,000 people in Northwest Montana, talks a lot about the STP, not the Stone Temple Pilots, for those of you who grew up, the same 10 people. This concern that when she goes to do community work, they go from the school to the community center to City Hall to the county commissioner meeting, and they might as well take a van together because you've got the same 10 people. So, the question motivating some of that work is, how do we unlock greater amounts of local leadership? Said another way, how do we cultivate more Aaron Miltenbergers and Lysandra Gonzalez's? How do we get more people off the sidelines, pulling forward in community? And what is striking about the survey is, I'll give you like an example of a funnel. 68% of the rural Americans surveyed have an idea about how to make their community better. 46% want to be more involved in their community, but just 9% are currently leading a project. So how do we take the untapped potential of the 7 in 10 rural Americans who have an idea about how to make their community better and get them to step forward and lead? And what is interesting in the study is, we looked at maybe some predictors of what it would take to move someone towards that leadership place. And the encouraging news is, demographics are not destiny. It is not age and income and educational attainment or political affiliation that predicts greater levels of participation and local leadership. The strongest predictor is in communities where people have a strong sense of social cohesion. They are 3.5 times more likely to lead a project than in a community where they perceive a low level of social cohesion. And so, Jack, to your point about how do we cultivate folks coming to the table and pulling together, unleashing the innovation that already exists and the leadership that already exists in communities that Aaron is speaking about, is on some level, we have to continue to create the conditions under which communities can come together and work. And all of the sort of solutions that can get cooked up in this town about what does it take to help rural communities thrive can show up as programs, as grant programs that I have to apply for, that I have to have the capacity for. And if we're continuing to turn to the same 10 people to ask them to implement and pursue, we are not reaching all the ways we can help rural communities thrive. And that falls on philanthropy. It falls on public funding. You know, when we look at it, 20% of Americans live in a rural place. 3% of philanthropic dollars go to rural places. When we look at federal discretionary grant making, these grant programs that require you to fill out an RFP and compete on an uneven playing field with other places, per capita, 30% fewer dollars going to rural places. And so it's a resource dollar conversation, but it's also recognizing that what it takes to pursue and implement and secure that funding to do projects requires to get people off the sidelines. And so we're eager to unlock that leadership and bring forward solutions around how do we cultivate that as well.
Yeah.
Can I add something there?
Sure.
I think I love the focus and it's so essential. And thank you for your leadership in that space. We need it. I will say personally, and Aaron, you exude confidence. So this is probably not what you dealt with, but I don't know how to help, right? I didn't know how to break into the spaces and places where there were the 10 people that always did everything. And frankly, to be at the tables where at the end of the day, we can do everything we need to do in rural or in our local communities. But if we're not addressing the systems that are creating the conditions that we're experiencing, that's state level alignment and conversations that had to happen. And so for me, it's what we're supporting is building rising young leaders, civic influencers, right? Gabby, who's here in the room, is she developed this. She's like, everybody's running around in her age group saying, I want to be a social media influencer or an influencer. And Gabby's like, we need civic influencers. And so we have a fellowship for young people ages 16 to 24 that's available to any young person in their local community across the state to say, I want to step up and I want to not only do something to change my community, but I want to learn the skills that will help me do it in the most sophisticated way. Because when you have civil discourse, when you have the ability to do data-driven decision-making and understand how to be a powerful change agent, then you're able to really create impact as a young person or as somebody in your local community. And I think that's really important because I think that so many people want to, they're just like, how do I?
So Aaron, let me bring you in on this. I think that we sometimes we need to resist the urge to simply scale, right? There can be some danger in scaling, ideas. So maybe I'd say, like, how do we elevate the voices, the best practices, and the insights to the state level or the regional level or other levels to make some of those systems changes?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. That's a great question. I think a lot about natural systems, whether they be body systems or the systems in nature that we see. If there were a single species of plant or tree that suddenly started growing everywhere, it would be a problem, right? Our ecosystem only survives when there are specific species that grow in pockets that are interrelated and codependent. In the same way, if we have something in our body that is a single group of cells that starts growing rapidly, it's called cancer, we don't want it in there, right? But what we do want are organs that fit specific functions. So we need lungs that work really well. We need kidneys that work really well. We need brains and hearts that work really well. In the same sort of way, we don't think about scaling a single solution across the state of Colorado. We find those pockets that are working really well, and then we find ways to connect them to other pockets that are working really well. We produce these connections, like Adrian had said, with Reimagine Colorado, that connect grass tops to grassroots. And one of the things that we believe in is emergent strategy or emergent leadership. First of all, shout out to Bill and then to Betcher Foundation. We believe that leadership is an activity, it's not a position, right? Leadership in rural spaces is oftentimes the bus driver. It's the person who works at the cafe that knows everybody. It's your barber, it's your hairstylist who's connecting different people to different things, opportunities. It's your teacher in the school or your gym coach. And so when leadership is an activity and not a position, when we can strengthen the opportunity for everybody to lead from multiple positions within a community to get really focused on what we do well, not try to do things that other people do well and scale them into our community. It's not hyper local, it's hyper effective, right? And so I think what we need from a policy standpoint is investment in local communities and find out what's going really well there and not try to think about replicating that across other communities, but it's building connective tissue to those things that are working really well in small communities.
Thank you. So I'd love to take a few questions from folks before we transition into table talk. If there's anyone that has a question, we can run a mic. Yeah, Rajan.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Rashawn. I think a lot about social capital and the ways that I'm one of the same 10 people in some spaces, or at least have been. And I'm also a community organizer. And one of the sort of questions that came to mind, Bill, as you were talking about the STP, is there a way that they can be seen? So often we talk about the same 10 people, and like I am in public engagement. I lament those 10 people and sort of get sick of hearing them. And I wonder if there's a way to turn them into people who develop and cultivate other leadership, and if that's part of the strategy that's like going to be critical for some of these rural places where they know they can sort of be the spotters for the things that need to grow, that need more investment. And can those same 10 people be trained and cultivated as leadership developers? Is that part of the strategy, or is that a thing that this project is pursuing?
Rashawn, so appreciate the question. I think it's a great connection to the point that Lysandra was building on, which is, there's a degree of skill development that needs to come alongside expectation of leadership. That's not something our organization is quite weighed in, because we don't come with the solution. We believe the solutions exist locally, but if someone comes forward and says, I was just having a conversation with the Civic Canopy, who is doing work to create sort of civic hubs around the state. And Mary Jo Standard, an amazing leader in Montezuma County, has been looking at leadership development through this lens, that, leadership development done in isolation of the community challenges, problems, and solutions we want to address kind of falls flat as like an activity, and is trying to reorient around that work. And I think, Lysandra's work to sort of bring forward youth who want to develop the skills to make their communities better. Another innovation that we heard about when we were in Monte Vista is Civics Lab. It's an initiative brought forward by a community member to try to create sort of career-connected learning in public sector work that is around sort of leadership around a problem you want to solve. So there's pockets of ways of thinking. In terms of the strategy and what does it mean for folks who are thinking about systems and policy, I think it's probably a good place for this room to dialogue, because we want to sort of create the conditions without imposing the structure.
Yeah. An online question? Awesome.
Okay, we have a comment and question from Tammy Delaney. Emergent leadership is spot on, as is cultivating civic influencers. Thank you both on that. Thoughts on how to foster and enable leadership development within the education realm. On a rural level, we see this firsthand through FBLA, FFA, and 4-H programs, yet that is not reaching all youth. Aaron is starting to answer this.
I'll start, and then I'll pass the mic over. I think what's really important, I get to do amazing work with young people every day, and this generation of young people is incredible, y'all. Like, and here's the thing, they're not waiting for you to get out of the way. They're building parallel and redundant systems around your stuff, because your stuff is just slow and old and in the way. And they're not going to wait around for you to figure out that you need to step back and make space. And they're leading from a collectivist standpoint. They care a lot about their friends and their neighbors and their peers and the voices that aren't the same 10 people. And so when we think about working with young people, I think it's skill development. I think it's building systems that not only allow for, but intricately design, co-design with young people, those systems. And so we have a lot of really cool initiatives that we're doing right now where we're partnering with young people as experts in their lived experience in the community to design and solve community problems. We're paying them for that work. We're engaging them in co-curricular experiences. They're getting concurrent enrollment credit, and they're building portfolios, which is a part of the big three for CDE for their graduation requirements. So it's taking all the things that are already built into the system and finding ways to flip those that respond to what the young people are really looking for, that provide re-engagement not only into their learning journey, but re-engagement, to Rashawn's point earlier, into the civic muscle of their community.
I mean, I agree with that completely. I'll say two things that sort of are mantras for me is the system is designed to produce the result we have. And second, we shouldn't be designing or redesigning systems without those most impacted. And so with building on that, we have to create the conditions from a policy standpoint to really support the things that we know have to change on the ground, right? And so that's one. And then two, things that we're digging deep into is really challenging all of us folks that are in the room with formal authority, I guess you would say, or who are leading systems, to hand over the design of it to young people. And so this is a really creative and can be scary for people to hear this, but put them in a room and say, what would you do to redesign this entire system? And hear the innovation that comes from it, and be honest and say, we may not be able to do that entire design because there's a lot of things that are on us around structures and policy and funding that already exist. But where can we start to design based off them without any adult or any influence what it would look like? And so I think we just have to get really courageous to do that. And we struggle even to do it, even when we're leading this work, because we have all of the formal things put on our shoulders, right? Funders. The way you fund is not the norm. And in fact, I'm going to say something really, hopefully none of my funders are in the room, but the reality is that funders often create the system unintentionally, right? There's a scarcity mindset in the ecosystem and a competitiveness that exists in the ecosystem that continues to produce what we're trying to solve for. So
We're going to do one more question. I think Colin, yes.
Jack, this actually may be a question for you and Fritz and the DU team. But I have, well, first off, Colin Lacey, I represent founder of Homegrown Pathways. I'm based on the Western Slope. We run a direct service career pathways model with rural public schools on the western side of the state. My question is around next steps for this project as it relates to advocacy for more resources around the data point that Bill just shared. Because from my perspective, until we start to move the needle on that 20% to 3% gap, very little else matters in terms of the potential impact that we can have. And I think this project has done a really thoughtful job of creating a framework, developing a report. And I'm curious to kind of learn more about both this project and then collectively what we can continue to do to move that needle. Because I think, you know, I get invites to attend, there's a lot of rural conferences, there's a lot of rural reports, there's a lot of attention now rightfully being paid to rural. The needle on that 20 to 30 hasn't moved very much still. And so I think what can we start to do on that front, and excited about the framework you've created. So sorry if that's like also a downer question, but
Well, while you're walking the mic, I just want to build on what Colin's noting, and can't tell you what the Colorado Project will do about it, but I would just say that not only that 3%, 20% is about philanthropic dollars, and 20 years ago it was 7%. So it's actually going in the wrong direction when it comes to philanthropy. And when we think about the sort of federal discretionary grant dollars, that 30% delta per capita, I think that is about, yes, resources, public resources, state and federal, but it's also how those resources move. RFPs where rural communities are asked to compete for dollars is not a model that is working. And I understand we have to steward taxpayer dollars carefully and ensure that there are sort of compliance-oriented pieces. And at the same time, there are examples of ways that programs are designed to listen first. And I'll just give you two quick ones. The Economic Development Administration ran two programs over the past couple of years. One is called the Economic Recovery Core Fellowship Program. The other was the Recompete Pilot Program. And I just bring those forward as examples that were designed with rural first, that are about embedding capacity locally. And we're not sort of like, here's the RFP competitive piece. It's let's go listen to communities and help them define the economic development path forward. So we have examples. And if state agencies could audit their expenditures against a rural urban sort of math, we could maybe get better data over time on some of these things. Because in philanthropy, it's going the wrong direction. And we really haven't turned the needle on the federal and state public funding for rural either.
Since you called me out on this, I mean, first of all, it's a great question, and I don't have a perfect answer. So what I'd say, that's one of the things we'd really love your input. Our impulse is to have an impact, and so we don't want to just produce a report along with many others. I don't want to overstate our importance in the ecosystem but we do have the ability to convene people. I think as I was just thinking about that, so the answer is I don't yet know. There's pieces of it we can anticipate, the ability to engage with not just the future governor, but we have good ties with the state legislature, et cetera, et cetera. So, we'd already thought of that. I think, in listening, it'd be fascinating. I'm looking at Jack now to think about convening a group of leading philanthropies, other people in positions to actually, to squarely address that issue. So let's think about that. And, in your conversation, I'd love to engage further with you about what we could do in that space. But it's at the end of the day, that's the real question is how do we actually make something change, and that's hard. So I'll leave it at that at this point. That I don't have a great answer as to how we're going to do this, but we want to find that answer. So we'd love to engage with you, our panelists, and others in thinking about how we maximize the impact of the work that's been done, and then what are those next steps. So, but thank you for that question.
Aaron, you want to add? Sure.
I feel called to tell a quick story. To Bill's earlier point about the way that philanthropy operates in community, I think we really have to agitate on the traditional measures, outputs, and outcomes that philanthropy asks partners, community partners to provide. We had a dear funder, a large foundation in the state of Colorado, who we had approached about workforce development. And we have 15 different partners that were co-designing workforce development and learning pathways in the San Luis Valley. And this foundation lead kept coming back with the question of, but who's doing the work? We're like, well, these people are, it's like the stone soup. You guys know the stone soup story, right? Everybody brings a little bit and puts it in the pot. And then this foundation officer is saying, but who made the soup? And I'm trying to explain that their frame is incorrect, right?
Yes.
When you're coming from a place where there's a single input and a single output, it's really easy to measure. But we live in a complicated and nuanced world, right? This ecosystem of community, philanthropy, whatever, it's complicated. And we've got to reframe those questions from I'm going to give you this and I'm going to get this output to in what ways can I leverage, in what ways can I open up opportunities and create that, I love this word, liminal space for the magic to happen naturally, right?
Thank you. Yeah, and really it's a good transition question, I think, Colin, that you asked. And, you know, I'm mindful as we go forward with the work this year that we can do a lot of meaningful work and say a lot of meaningful things. But how much value does it provide if that is a gigantic list of things to try to ask folks to move on at any level? And so helping us kind of make some decisions on, you know, where to focus and still to kind of hold on to what's true about the Colorado project, thinking regionally, you know, thinking at the intersection of issues, et cetera, I think is why we're excited to have you on the journey as a project participant. So now we're going to turn it over to you all to have some dialogue and conversations. We have 3 questions. There's always danger in asking folks to self-facilitate their tables. We do not have designated facilitators, so I'll try to kind of move us along. We're going to take about 25 minutes, most likely. So I'd say, you know, try to move through the first question, which really is designed to just kind of get us thinking and in alignment maybe around the value of our rural spaces and our rural communities. And then spend a little bit of time on question 2 and 3 there and thinking about maybe where are some of our opportunities. And in particular with number 3, feel free to think big, think bold, and think outrageous. When nobody had gone to the moon, that was outrageous to think about doing that, right? So think big and capture some of those ideas if you so choose on sticky notes at your table. We've got some chart paper here. Would love to see some of those pop up. I think just for Colorado project folks to kind of continue to think about what our partners are thinking about. You don't have to attribute it to yourself if you don't want to, but if you do, I might contact you back about that, but we won't post it externally or anything like that. Okay, so we're a little bit behind, apologies, but we'll try to do about 25 minutes and then we'll do some wrap up, maybe some popcorn share out and a call to action. Okay. Yeah, and thank you to our panel. Yeah. Hey, Sage, would you mind running a mic? I'm just going to popcorn a few insights. I'm going to call the group back here to the full group so we can close out. Hope you had great conversations. I want to just popcorn out just a few insights from the tables. And I think just interested as we bring folks back to the large group, if you can hear me, raise your hand. Excellent. So as we come back to the large group, just interested, how did you answer some of the questions? What was, you know, if there's something particularly insightful or something outrageous that you want to share, try to be brief and succinct if you can, and we'll get as many share-ins here as possible in the next 4 or 5 minutes. Sage, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief for the group here. Although first I have to say thank you for the moon shout out when you set us up, because we are going back to the moon in a month. I hope you guys realize that. NASA's Artemis II mission, spacecraft built here in Colorado. So the question number 1 here, we thought, you know, there's a lot of dystopian science movies that look like, that show what would happen if everybody left the rural areas. And then Max and others pointed out it is already happening, right? And I think all of us are aware that generally speaking, there's a lot of depopulation. So doesn't look good. It causes a lot of challenges. We also mentioned that, right, a lot of reason that people move to Colorado, even to move in the urban areas,
is because they want to go out and recreate and take advantage of the things in the rural areas, not to mention agricultural economy. There's a lot of reasons. Our second question, we figured there's a lot of things, obviously, that we hope can be done. Facilitating co-working spaces in rural areas, like there was an example of one in Florence. Also building in these co-working spaces or other places where you have social services along with the working areas. And I forget the example, but childcare in an area where, in dentist offices in an area where you also have job training skills and those sorts of things. And then our third one for the big audacious ideas, we had 4. And I know I said pick one, but we're not going to. I'm with Lockheed Martin. We've talked about this before. We think there's a lot of opportunity to help rural areas and existing businesses in rural areas get certifications and things that would help them get into manufacturing supply chains that are in the aerospace industry or others. It's just what stops a lot of these businesses is the cost of getting ISO 9100 certified, the cost of getting cyber certified, and very few small companies have the opportunity to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to get these certifications for the chance of a contract years down the road. So what about a pilot program to get companies these certifications and see if it works? A lot of other ideas, data centers. Leonard, our student, brought up data centers, right? There's a lot of challenges with data centers, but also a lot of opportunity. And they're kind of, in some ways, if you can deal with the infrastructure issues like power, they're perfect for rural areas because their primary employers bring in some money, but they also don't have a lot of jobs, because one of the things that stops companies from locating in rural areas is they don't have the workforce there, right? There's not enough people. So this might be a good balance. Supporting small companies in all sorts of ways. And then one of the ideas was like AI is really growing, right? We don't know where it's going to go. And can there be a lot of small companies, small communities in rural areas could maybe innovate in how to apply AI and actually could kind of leapfrog economically a lot of the larger companies, larger areas. So I think anything else that I missed or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, I'm going to share some insights from the online group really quickly. Just some of the bigger takeaways was we talked about the importance of more civic engagement opportunities, especially for young people. So creating avenues for them to understand how they can get better involved in their local communities, such as shadowing local government officials, kind of like mock, government meetings, things like that, to introduce them to these opportunities to make change in their community. Also, more collaboration between education and workforce development initiatives and agencies. So, for example, they mentioned the Yampa Valley Partnership for Students, Stewardship and Sustainability as examples of emerging programs for work-based learning. We need more of these types of collaborations, but that the biggest issue is they need to be reliably funded beyond grants and one-time initiatives. And that was one of the biggest concerns, is more sustainable funding, and how Tabor kind of hurts some of these hopes. So that was just a few of the online takeaways.
Thank you, Katie. A few other insights from the tables. Naz?
Thanks. I'll just share one small group, but big ideas here. We talked about the concept of a Colorado Corps, like a localized version of AmeriCorps, taking young volunteers from urban to rural areas, embedding in those rural areas for an extended period of time, a year or 2 years. And one of the things that we thought that could facilitate was the kind of civic engagement that Katie is talking about, as well as building that connective tissue that Aaron was discussing on the panel.
Great, thank you.
We also talked about how we could address some of our transportation challenges across the state through a network of gondolas, tramways, like they have in Bogota and some parts of this, like the Swiss Alps, to get people from the urban to the rural and vice versa, but also that those tramway installations can connect to, can stack broadband networks on top of them, or with them, however, that they can dual construction, create jobs out in the rural places, but then also create transportation options, better connectivity in between mountain towns that's sustainable, simple, and works and gets us all off of I-70, damn it.
Yes, vivid image. One or two others? Yeah. And then we'll
All right, I've already clustered our little sticky notes because I am a facilitator. So we had a great conversation about what if we had a sort of wife swap of many kinds, where legislators wife swap with into rural communities. Or we sort of folded the map of Colorado either diagonally or across the Front Range and made sort of sister cities and created more connection and relationship between urban and rural communities. We talked about uplifting bright spots and bringing young people back to rural places, having places for young people to be able to prototype and try on small projects and even be able to fail, right, and learn from them. And then we talked a lot about civic hubs and building regional civic hubs and the local civic capacity that could be ways of uplifting ground up policy solutions, right? Not just assuming that you have to make it at the state level and then make local folks implement it. And then we talked about the social economy and building a social economy. So that space in between for-profit and nonprofit, and how that there's a liminal space there, a lot of gray area that can be explored with democratic ways of building cooperatives, employee ownership, and a Colorado Federation of Co-ops. So lots of good ideas.
Okay, I think we're going to have to probably leave it there. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us and give you kind of 3 quick points as next steps and call to action. The tent of inclusion is open. As we launch into 2026, we will be undertaking visits back to the regions. Will not simply be a rinse and repeat of our experience, but we are working with local folks in the communities to figure out exactly the nature of those visits, but we intend to go deeper. And I think some of the conversations we had today will help guide those. So invitation to join us as a participant. More information and dates coming soon, or just shoot me an email. Connect us to leaders and innovators in those 3 regions. I'm always looking for folks to connect with to build out those agendas and think about the type of opportunities that we should have for engaging folks. And then as we think about the opportunity that we're in, I'm mindful that many of the folks here represent organizations and leadership positions, are members of advocacy groups and others, and are incredibly influential. And so start to think about what it might look like to have an individual or group commitment to acting on what you've heard today, but also staying up with us on more information that we release and the conversation that we have later on this summer and early fall. We'll kind of do another roundtable that we hope you'll come to. What does it look like to commit to some of those learnings? So thank you all so much.